In today's news segment, me and my team members will be discussing several items that we learned over the course. Those items are the ACA and health disparities, cultural competence and humility, and last but not least, the iron triangle. To refresh your memory, I'll give you a summary of each, starting with the ACA and health disparities. The acronym ACA stands for Affordable Care Act. Although the term disparities is often interpreted to mean racial or ethnic disparities, in healthcare, disparities refer to differences in health and healthcare between population groups. The topic of healthcare disparities and how healthcare reform will affect them has many questions forming. Evidence indicates that the Affordable Care Act, as originally intended, will reduce disparities in coverage across healthcare. Many hope in the near future the ACA continue reducing health disparity and it will serve a huge impact on the healthcare coverage. Then we have cultural competence and humility. Cultural competence implies that one can function with a thorough knowledge of the morals and beliefs of another culture, and cultural humility acknowledges that it is impossible to be adequately knowledgeable about cultures than one's own. Finally, we have the iron triangle, which comprises the policymaking relationship among the congressional committees and the bureaucracy and interest groups. Now that I have given you a quick overview, here's my team members with more information.
Today I'll be giving you some general background information on the Affordable Care Act and the ACA. The Affordable Care Act was signed into law on March 23rd to reform healthcare in America. The ACA makes healthcare insurance coverage more secure, reliable for Americans who have it. It makes coverage more affordable for families and small business owners. It brings down expensive healthcare costs that has put a strain on individual families, employees, and the federal budget. I personally think the ACA is great. Why? Because it does not only help one certain class, it helps everyone, from the lower class, middle class, and even the ones in the higher tax brackets. On the other hand, the new Affordable Care Act that President Trump is trying to come up with, I personally don't agree with it. Well, now I have gave you some general information on the ACA in my opinion. I'm going to move on to health disparities. Health disparities refers to the difference in the health status of different groups. Disparities affects groups who have experienced greater obstacles to health based on their racial or ethnic group, religion, social economic status, gender, age, mental health, physical disability, sexual oriented, or gender identity. Also, other historically linked groups to discriminations or exclusive. Efforts to eliminate disparities and achieve healthy equality have focused primarily on the decrease of disease and illness and better health care.
For that background information, much needed. All right, so now we're going to move on to access, cost, and quality in regards to the ACA and health disparities. First, let's focus on the ACA. The activation of the ACA decreased cost, increased access, and pretty much equaled out the quality of health care that individuals are receiving. Over time, the cost will equal out, the access may drop, as well as the quality. And the activation of the ACA has balanced out the iron triangle. And this is only for the time being. With healthcare constantly changing, this means that the policies as well as health insurance must change too. It has to change with the healthcare field, which will help individuals maintain a low cost, a high quality, and high access. Now we're going to move on to health disparities. Several factors play a role in the iron triangle in regards to health disparities. Some of these factors can be the geographic location of an individual, their ethnic, as well as their racial background. Individuals of diverse ethnic and racial backgrounds will be less inclined to go see a healthcare provider who is not as understanding of such ethnic and racial backgrounds, thus increasing access, increasing cost, but drastically decreasing quality. Now, the increase in access does seem like a very good factor, but it's not for a positive reason. The lack of cultural competence is what plays a part in this. And now we'll move on to Talia Walker, who is going to introduce and explain cultural competence as well as cultural humility within the healthcare field. Now to you, Talia.
Candace. So first I'd like to just give the definition of competency and the definition of humility. When I was looking up the definition for competent, I found sufficient skill, properly qualified, adequate, but not exceptional. And when I looked up humble, I found words like not arrogant and courteously respectful. So, cultural humility and cultural competency, they have similarities. For instance, both both of those, if it were to be two different professionals, both would be aware, both would have knowledge, but they would have different ways of acquiring that knowledge. So there are similarities between a person that is cultural, has cultural competence, and cultural humility. Similarities would include being aware, having knowledge. They still have a knowledge base. It's just they have a different style of acquiring, digesting, and using that knowledge. So I like to give a scenario. So you have two teachers. One is condescending and one is understanding. So the understanding teacher would want to understand where you're coming from. They want to listen and see if there's maybe a new adapted approach that they could take towards your issue versus a condescending teacher who doesn't really want to hear what you have to say. They feel like they've heard all the excuses in the book. There's nothing new that you could tell them that would change their mind, and really ultimately your new proposition is a waste of their time. So these two teachers both teachers are qualified. Both teachers are qualified, but which teacher has room for growth? Which teacher could be innovative and create something new? The understanding teacher, which would represent cultural humility. In class, we were given an assignment to describe cultural humility and cultural competency. And these were some words that our group came up with. So for cultural humility, we said that it was more so an attitude learned. And for cultural competency, it was a certification earned. And what comes with a certification is systematic. It's classroom styled. It's by the book. In opposition to cultural humility, which is more so you're open to understanding and hearing people out rather than just relying on book smarts. And for cultural humility, we said that they would be the expert. The person who you're learning from is the expert, in opposition to cultural competency, where you feel like you're the expert. You feel like you have all the answers and that they're coming to you for help. So that means that they need you because you have the education and requirements. And for cultural humility, we said that in cultural humility, you're an outsider and an insider rather than cultural competency to where you feel like you have the credentials to then be an insider and know about another person's culture. Think of cultural competency as more of a straight line. You have your beginning where you get your education, and then you have your end where you're certified and you're the expert. But with cultural humility, it's more of a circle. It's a constant flow of learning rather than, you hitting a brick wall with cultural competency. It's limiting. Cultural competency is limiting. And with cultural competency, you become prone to bias. You can also run the risk of ultimately becoming racist and have a false sense of nationalism because you feel like you know so much about this culture that then you could find yourself feeling like you're better than the culture that you're actually trying to help with. I believe having cultural humility would be the best approach when trying to pursue a job in healthcare and also while carrying out your career. Thank you.
All right, thank you, ladies, for all that valuable information. My name is Anthony Means, and I will be summarizing today's broadcast. The Affordable Health Care Act is more secure and reliable for Americans that have it. Although in this new day and age with the current president, there has been a lot of dispute as the Affordable Care Act that Donald Trump has attempted to put into place really only tends to those that are in the higher tax brackets. Now, in regards to the iron triangle of healthcare, it is almost impossible to be perfect in each category, meaning that at least one out of the three, access, cost, and quality, will suffer in order for others to be efficient. Lastly, when it comes to cultural humility versus cultural competency, cultural humility is preferred. Cultural competency means that you are extremely confident in your ability and always have the right answers. However, it also means that you're most likely going to stunt your growth as a healthcare professional. Cultural humility, on the other hand, allows you to be more personal with your patients. Not only are you asking the questions needed to ensure that you have a personal relationship with each of your clients, but it allows you to not discriminate based on culture or background. Thank you all for tuning in today to this broadcast of FAMU. Make sure to tune in next week for our next episode as we speak about concerns with the cleanliness of current healthcare facilities. This is Anthony Means checking out. FAMU today, FAMU tomorrow, FAMU forever.
Include healthy. Okay, we're gonna have to cut the healthy part out. Include healthy. Just cut that part out.
I totally forgot what I was gonna say. Which is fine.
Thank you for tuning in. Wow, okay.
And a lot of restart.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, next time.
Of which, well,
Okay, I didn't want. And thank you for tuning in to FAMU, your reliable news station. We have exciting I did it again.
It was preferred will help you grow as a. I gotta read.